Live from Washington, D.C., Sekulow Live. Phone lines are open for your questions right now.
So thanks to Chairman Ron Johnson and the Senate's Homeland Security Committee, we have an interim report on their investigation between how the FBI handled the Clinton investigation. And we know from this investigation by that Senate committee, a number of text messages have come out between two agents, well known now, Peter Strzok and Lisa Page. Peter Strzok, who was the number two at counterintelligence for the FBI, took the lead on both the Clinton email investigation for the FBI and the Russia investigation for the FBI. It was ultimately both of them. Lisa Page was an attorney, we believe, in Andrew McCabe's office at the time. Both of them ended up on Special Counsel Mueller's team and then were dismissed sometime over the summer, this past summer, because of, again, I believe these text messages revealing not only how they felt about President Trump and the very negative comments they make about President Trump, but also about how they talk about the investigations themselves. Remember, Strzok had said in the earlier text messages, there's no there when it comes to Trump. He would know, by the way, because he was leading the Russia investigation. But maybe I'll join because I need to make things right because of how the Clinton investigation kind of got botched, in their words, kind of ended up probably hurting Hillary Clinton politically because of the way they closed it and then reopened it. Well, now we've got new text messages. In fact, if you're watching on Facebook and Periscope, hundreds of pages. I don't know exactly how many pages. This is 500? 500 pages I'm holding in my hand. Yeah, it's a lot. This is not all of their text messages, by the way, just the newly released text messages in the interim report. We have this interesting line of messages, and then I want to get your thoughts on this. These are from September of 2016. So this is after Jim Comey initially closed the email investigation into Hillary Clinton and before he reopened it. Okay, so it's that time period after he closed it and before he reopened it. So this is Peter Strzok to Lisa Page. Check out my 9:30 meeting on September 7th. And then she writes back, I can tell you why you're having that meeting. It's not what you think. He writes back, Strzok, talking points for D, that's Director Comey. And then she writes back, yes, because POTUS wants to know everything we are doing. That POTUS would be President Obama. And then he writes back, I'm sure an honest answer will come out of that meeting, ... Now, again, you could go a lot of directions with this. One, it is, again, in between the time period when Comey initially closed the Clinton investigation, and then he ultimately ends up reopening it because they found those missing emails. Now we know that they knew about the missing emails a month before they reopened the investigation and closed it 2 days before the election. A horrendous move, regardless of what side of the aisle you are on, because, again, I think way too involved in the political process in America. But we have a president who said that he did not want to did not talk to the Attorney General about pending investigations. This is a quote. President Obama on Fox News, April 10th, 2016. I do not talk to the Attorney General about pending investigations. I do not talk to FBI directors about pending investigations. We have a strict line. I guarantee it that there is no political influence in any investigation conducted by the Department of Justice or the FBI, not just in this case, talking about the Clinton case, but in any case, full stop, period. And yet in these text messages, quote, POTUS wants to know everything we are doing. Sounds a lot different than what the president told Fox News. Folks, whether you want to call it a shadow government, a deep state, at the top state actors, there's a lot we've got to do to get our country back on track, to restore our national security agencies and law enforcement agencies like the FBI. We'll talk about it when we come back. We have new text messages between Peter Strzok and Lisa Page. Peter Strzok, who was the number 2 counterintelligence at FBI. Lisa Page, who was an FBI attorney, we believe in the Deputy Director Andrew McCabe's office. Strzok oversaw for the FBI the Clinton email investigation. He was there to interview Hillary Clinton. He was there to interview, oversaw the Russia investigation for the FBI. He was there to interview Mike Flynn. So this is very important people. These are not, again, mid-level folks. These are top folks at the Federal Bureau of Investigation. And their text messages have shed a lot of light, not only on their political biases, what they thought about President Trump even before he was elected, what they thought about the investigation to Hillary Clinton, but now we're starting to get some substance about the work that they were doing in the middle of the Clinton investigation. So you remember, let me walk you through the timeline. April 10th, 2016, President Obama tells Fox News, quote, I do not talk to the Attorney General about pending investigations. I do not talk to FBI directors about pending investigations. We have a strict line. July 1st, 2016, you have Attorney General Lynch announced that she would accept the FBI's recommendation on whether to bring charges in the Clinton email investigation. That's after the Clinton-Lynch tarmac meeting. So that was her pushback as well. I'll just defer to whatever the FBI decides to do. We now have text messages between Strzok and Page on that this looks horrible. It appears to be choreographed. Did the DOJ tell us yesterday they were going to do this so that Director Comey added that language? And again, so we have text on that. We then know that on July 2nd, Peter Strzok interviews Hillary Clinton. And 3 days later, FBI Director Jim Comey announced he would not recommend, you all remember that, criminal charges in the Clinton email investigation. Then on August 15th, we have learned about the insurance policy in Andy's office. Remember those text messages? In Andy's office, that was August 15th. September 2nd, Strzok and Page are preparing talking points for then FBI Director James Comey to inform President Obama about the Clinton email investigation. Now, this is after it was closed and before it was reopened. The actual text is, I can tell you why you're having that meeting, Lisa Page writes to Peter Strzok. It's not what you think. Talking points for Director Comey, Peter Strzok writes. Page writes back, yes, because POTUS wants to know everything we are doing. September 28th, Deputy Director McCabe finds out and tells Strzok about the missing emails that are on Anthony Weiner's computer. Then a month later, Jim Comey reopens the Clinton email investigation. The White House say they're surprised by that. Ultimately, he closes the investigation on November 6th. But we have a White House October 31st saying they promised to avoid even the appearance of political interference, and yet we have these text messages that said POTUS wants to know everything we are doing. Logan, let's go right to the phones, take comments. And then we'll get Than in the conversation as well.
Let's start with Mike in Oregon on line 2. Mike, welcome.
Hi, I just have a simple comment question. So everything keeps coming out about Hillary and Obama involved in the investigation and everything going on with Trump. Is anything going to come of this?
Well, I think, let me go to Than Bennett because Than, listen, I'm holding in my hands. I know for our radio audience, this is not so helpful, but for our Facebook and Periscope audience here for radio, you can hear it is like a couple of Bibles, weight-wise, holding in my hands here. Just the interim report, which includes some of the text messages that have been reviewed by the Senate's Homeland Security Committee. So, Than, walk us through. This is Chairman Johnson's interim report on the investigation into the FBI's handling of the Hillary Clinton email matter.
Yeah, it's his interim report, Jordan. I'm holding it in my hand, which indicates that there will be a final report at some time. And You see in here a compilation of information that he's gathered from many sources. Some of it came from the Inspector General. Some of it came directly from the department as a result of demanding that. Some of it came from witness interviews. So there will be a final report. But, Jordan, I think it's going to be important for people to look at reports like these and others that draw from the actual facts, because I don't think you will see a concise compilation of those facts on the mainstream media. I look at these facts, Jordan, and I would just say this. I think it was already abundantly clear that the seventh floor at the FBI, so the leadership, and you can go through all of the names involved, there are a litany of them, they were politically biased and they took action on those biases, Jordan. But what this report points out is that it was very likely the politicals were aware of it as well. And when I say politicals, I literally mean President Obama. That, of course, takes it to an entirely new level. But I think if you look at the facts on its face, it is abundantly clear that the bias on the 7th floor of the FBI dictated their operations in this case.
Now, what we also know, and what I think could be clarified here, and it could make it more interesting, is that the FBI also began investigating the Russia matter around this time period. I don't know the exact date. I don't know if we even know the exact date, but it was around this time period. Could it be that the president wanted to be informed by Director Comey because, quote, POTUS wants to know everything we are doing? Strzok was leading that investigation as well. Could it be that the president wanted to know everything about the investigation into Russia and whether there was some collusion with the Trump campaign? That would be interesting as well. And that's why I think Than's talking about this context that we need to build as we're putting all of these parts together. The media, the mainstream media, doesn't want to do this for you. So we have to kind of take it as is. And we're taking today what we've got. We're just starting to review it and bringing this to your attention. Take your phone calls and getting your comments on it.
Let's go ahead and take another call. Let's go to Pat in New Jersey on line 5.
Hey, Pat.
Hey guys, how we doing?
We're good.
I have a question. I grew up and I was taught about checks and balances, and the amount of evidence that is compiled for all of the DOJ people involved and the FBI people involved, Hillary Clinton, the president, everybody involved. If they're still in their jobs and at their posts, who's going to arrest them? Because they're the highest. So who's checking and balancing them?
Well, listen, there's a big question again about that when it comes to our law enforcement community. I heard, I think it was Joe Biden and doing an interview with CNN. He's thinking about running for president. He said, the way that we're doing this, the FBI, it's exactly what the Russians want. We're pointing out these bad apples and wrongdoing. This idea that we can never, expose like wrongdoing within our government because it may look bad to the Russians or something. Like for instance, what are we so worried about with the Russians anyways? We're the superpower in the world. And if we have problems, we need to correct it. We don't need to hide it from the American people because of how it may make America look. I mean, to me, that's a very dangerous statement that Joe Biden is making. And it's why there's so much pushback in Washington, D.C. They agree with that point to getting this information out to the American people.
And in fact, Jordan, I would argue that it's more important to hold them accountable than just about anyone because we endow them with awesome powers to investigate and surveil and ultimately recommend evidence that will then be used by the DOJ to prosecute. So I think they should be held to a higher standard. One thing I would point out, though, I think the sunlight is working. I mean, you've seen the firing of James Comey. You've seen the departures of James Baker and Jim Rubicki and Andrew McCabe. Now, I do think that there are a number of others that still have their job inside the agency. Peter Strzok and Lisa Page, certainly among them. We're talking about their text messages today that need to go. But to the point that you're making, Jordan, if you want to have an FBI and a Department of Justice with the ability to do real investigation and intercept terrorism and all the rest, you have to give them powers. But if you want those powers to be used for the right purposes, when they're abused, the legislative branch and the Department of Justice then have to root those bad actors out. Otherwise, those powers will ultimately go away because the people will rightfully pull them back.
We now know that Peter Strzok was being instructed by Lisa Page, who was in Deputy Director McCabe's office, the FBI, to prepare talking points for Director Comey so that Director Comey could brief the President Obama, because, quote, POTUS wants to know everything we are doing. Now, the belief is that this is about the Clinton investigation because of how it fits the timeline. And that's likely the case, but it also could be about the Russia investigation. And it says everything we are doing. So it could be about both. Because remember, this is in that time period between Jim Comey ending the Clinton investigation publicly and then Jim Comey reopening it much later. So again, he ends the investigation and then reopens it on October 28th and closes it 2 days before the election. So he ends it back. When does he actually end? This is in July 5th. And then October 28th, he reopens it, doesn't close it until 2 days before the election. In that time period is when the president wants to know everything. And again, I think this just sheds a lot more light on who we're dealing with. And this is not deep state. This is top government officials at the time, some still in their positions or still in the departments Folks, whether you want to call it a shadow government, a deep state, at the top state actors, there's a lot we've got to do to get our country back on track, to restore our national security agencies and law enforcement agencies like the FBI. We'll talk about it when we come back. So we've gone through the text messages. We've gone through the timeline for you. I have a feeling once we have more time here to go through these 500 pages, and this is just the interim report, I'm sure a lot of this were the missing messages. I mean, I'm assuming that some of this is the missing messages, Dan, that were recovered by the Inspector General in 48 hours, even though the FBI tried to say it was just a technical glitch and sorry, we can't get these. And then the Inspector General got them in 48 hours. So I'm assuming that some of these messages may have been from that time period as well.
This would be a pretty good reason to claim you can't find them, don't you think? If maybe they implicated the former president of the United States.
Wow.
It also, Jordan, we talked about